874. You guys are tuned into In the Weeds with Joseph Smith and Brandon Barberio. We just want to give you guys a big shout out today. It is Memorial Day, May 27th, 2019. We usually have weather with Bob this morning, but Bob is feeling a little under the weather, so we're going to skip Bob this morning. Plus, it's the first time it's actually been sunny out since we had Bob on our show. So usually every Monday it's been a crazy weather thing. So we're going to skip Bob today. So hopefully, Bob, you're starting to feel a little better and the Memorial Day weather hasn't got to you too bad. Guys, we have a great show for you today. We have Samson Racioppi in the studio, and then we also have Jotaherb on the phone. So we're going to have a lot of stuff to get to. But first, guys, we're going to get right into the news. James McGovern said in a radio interview on Wednesday. And now for your local and national Canada news for May 27th, 2019. Marijuana banking bill approved by Congressional Committee. Following multiple days of lengthy debate and consideration of several amendments, the House Financial Services Committee voted 45-15 to advance the legislation to the full body. Floor action has not yet been scheduled, but cannabis reform advocates are hopeful that the committee approval of the banking bill is a sign Democrats are ready to move broad marijuana reforms this year. Indeed, the House Rules Committee Chairman James McGovern said in a radio interview on Wednesday that he expects the chamber to vote on legislation to end federal marijuana prohibition within a matter of weeks. The banking bill addresses an urgent public safety concern for legitimate cash businesses that currently have no recourse but to operate with just cash. Chairman Maxine Waters said at the start of the committee's proceedings, which began on Tuesday and carried over through a second Wednesday meeting to vote on Thursday morning. Under the approved bill, federal banking regulators would not be able to punish financial institutions just because they work with marijuana businesses that are legal under the state or local laws, or those of an Indian tribe. The UFC will study effects of CBD on athletes. The Ultimate Fighting Championship has announced a multi-year partnership with Canadian cannabis company Aurora to test CBD products on the performance of UFC athlete participants in pursuit of advancing science to better support the health and wellness of competitors in one of the most physically testing sports on the planet. The multi-million-dollar deal the companies are calling a global partnership will specifically focus on hemp-derived CBD. They hope it will significantly advance the clinical science around how hemp-derived CBD impacts athlete recovery, given that the faster and better MMA fighters can recover between training sessions, the bigger a threat to opponents they will be on fight night. With the info that comes out of the partnership, Aurora expects to further develop products specifically to fight fighters' needs and further educate them on the best practices revealed in the forthcoming data pool. The research will take place in an unlikely center of scientific progress, Las Vegas. There, the UFC sport performance team will actually conduct all the research with athletes that are willing to participate. The main areas research will focus on initially are pain management, inflammation, recovery, and mental well-being. Dr. Jason Dyke, professor of the University of Alberta and Canada Research Chair in Molecular Medicine, will take the lead on Aurora's end for the project. Dyke also served on the board of Aurora, where he provides oversight into the company's scientific projects. Over the last 3 years, UFC fighters have been dabbling in CBD for recovery openly. New Hampshire lawmakers advance home cultivation legislation. Members of the House and Senate have approved versions of House Bill 364, which allows qualified patients the option to grow cannabis at home. The governor has not yet publicly commented on the bill, but yet has previously spoken out against broader legalization efforts. The measurement permits registered patients or their designated caregivers to cultivate up to 3 mature plants in a private location that is not subject to public view. An estimated 6,500 patients are authorized with the state to access medical cannabis via one of the state's 4 operational dispensaries. In 2018, lawmakers passed legislation to raise a cap on the total numbers of dispensaries nationwide. Square quietly launches program for CBD cannabis company credit card processing. Companies that will sell cannabis products, even those consistent of CBD derived from hemp, which was legalized in the United States through the Farm Bill late last year, are continuing to have trouble accessing basic financial services that are available to businesses in other sectors. That includes being able to maintain bank accounts and process their customers' credit cards. The latter problem could be solved under a new pilot program that has quietly been launched by the Payment Processing Service. Square has started a pilot program to accept payments for select CBD products. A Square spokesperson called it an invite-only beta in a statement to Mashable, but didn't provide specifics beyond that. Facebook is finally getting sued for targeting cannabis businesses. It's poetic justice at last as Facebook finally gets sued over unrelenting anti-cannabis policies. Even though representatives from the social media network recently said they would update their cannabis policies to be more fair and inclusive, they continue to delete accounts that sell or discuss cannabis. Now, their inconsistencies have come full circle as Facebook gets sued by a small cannabis business owner. The plaintiff, an owner of Canoramic Media Incorporated. Felicia Palmer uses her site to promote cannabis education and various events. She is being represented by David C. Holland from NORML's network of attorneys. He agreed to take the case pro bono. According to the lawsuit, Facebook Inc. has demonstrated a pattern of censorship and suppression of information regarding the legal uses of cannabis. Facebook deleted Palmer's account after she had paid for sponsored ads to promote her upcoming Canoramic Online Summit, which is a series of educational classes dedicated to teaching people that the safest and most effective ways to utilize cannabis. Palmer claims that Facebook induced her to buy into the network's paid-for-advertisement programs, most likely by offering to place her ad for a heavily discounted rate, which is something they often do. David Hollins, to a Forbes reporter, mentioned when a private company like Facebook, our largest resource for communication, prohibits the flow of this type of information, it essentially amounts to a threat to the public health, social welfare, and economic vitality of our communities. Unfortunately, this is nothing new for Facebook, which has been unequivocally anti-cannabis since day one. Among the pages that have been temporarily blocked or permanently removed are cannabis business companies, social media influencers that advertise cannabis products, industry education programs, and even accounts that promote social equity and expungement for cannabis-related charges. Since last year, they have been saying they would ease up on the licensed cannabis businesses, but their terms still categorize cannabis as an illicit drug. They mentioned that the companies should avoid using images of either recreational or medical marijuana, among other things. As countries and states scramble to update their cannabis policies, Facebook is struck getting sued for continuing the outdated practice of marginalizing cannabis business owners. And that's it for your local and national Canna News for May 27th, 2019. All right, and we are back. Lots of stuff going on in the news this week. It was actually kind of crazy. There's so many bills going on everywhere that just keep getting introduced. So it's hard to tell everybody what's going on. But the Square thing, the banking thing, it looks like it's about to go. California is about to release a whole bunch of banking, open up a whole bunch of banking and making it available for the cannabis industry. So we're going to see how the government reacts to that. Another thing is it's just crazy. Guys, one thing we really want to touch point on today, it's Memorial Day. So we're going to remember and honor all of our veterans and those who are still serving and those who are still suffering after serving. We have some great guests on today. We have Samson Racioppi on, who has served in the military, who is also a chairman and director of the Libertarian movement, right? And the chairman of the board of Masscann. So we also have Jotaherb on the phone with us today. Hoda, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. So Hoda is going to start off our show this week. He is the host of Grow and Tell. He's been growing for a while. He raises money for the NEVA Association in Mass. So lots of great things. So Hoda, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and where you're from.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on the show this morning. Very awesome. And I love listening to the news. There's so many exciting things going on. That banking bill is tremendous for the industry to move forward. It really is. It's an awesome thing. But so I am Jotaherb. That is Jota, not Jota. A lot of people put that hard J on there, but it's actually the Spanish pronunciation of the letter J. My real name's Jason. In high school, I had a nickname JJ. And when I was in college, I was working for a Cuban chef who started calling me Jota Jota. And that kind of stuck. And so that whole, ever since then, I've gone by Jota because there's a lot of JJs out there. There's a lot of Jasons out there, but there's very, very few Jotas. So usually I can hear my name very quickly. So that's where Jota comes from, and Jotaherb. So I love to grow, and it's not just cannabis, although cannabis is my favorite plant to grow. I grow a lot of fresh herbs. I come from a food background. I come from a restaurant background, and we always grew fresh herbs to cook with. So I always have rosemary and basil and mints and different things growing, and I just love plants. And my love for plants has always been what I'm about. I started growing in Tampa, Florida, in the early 90s. Crazy, scary, terrible at times. But I started growing with flood tubs. Way back in the early days, I had seeds that were smuggled over from Amsterdam, SK1 by SK1 and SK1 by NL5. I just fell in love with the plant. It was amazing. I had them growing in my closet in my bedroom. And I remember every morning the lights would kick on in the closet, and I would hear that flood pump go, and it was like living in a rainforest almost. It was awesome. But I love the plant. It's an amazing plant. And as I grew older, unfortunately, I had to take a break. I stopped growing because it was very scary down in Florida to grow. The police down there are tremendous. The amount of law enforcement that's down there, and choppers flying over the houses looking for heat signatures. It's insane down there. But I stopped. I started raising a family. I took a 20-year hiatus from growing, and it was miserable. To be honest with you, I really felt like I put a piece of myself in a closet away, someplace where it was kind of hidden for a long time until my kids got older. And then when they legalized here in Massachusetts about 2 years ago now, it's almost 2 years ago now, my wife was like, I'm getting a dog. I'm like, well, I'm getting a tent. And, my daughter was older, and she was going to college, and I knew she smoked, and it wasn't a big deal. My son, he's 27 now, so I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm done hiding. I'm time to go back to what I love doing, and it's legal. I can grow my own. So I started growing, and it was really interesting getting back into growing after that 20-year break. Because the first thing, I got back into the community, and I started looking to try to get seeds and clones or something to get some type of genetics that I could get going with. And the first thing I found was cookies. I'm like, what is a cookie? What the heck is a cookie? I don't understand. And so it took me a while. I started going. I went to the Harvest Cup in Worcester. Was the first event I went to, and it was, the Harvest Cup was the first big event that they had in Worcester, and after legalization, and I went, and I was going to Tommy's grow store and talking to him about growing and showing him my pictures, and he's actually the one that got me to go on Instagram, which is also has been tremendous for me in my growing and for building in the community. But I went to events, and I started meeting breeders, and I started talking to them, and I was able to figure out where I was. What is a cookie? Where did that come from? Where did these other strains? What happened to the lineage that I knew when I started? Right? What happened to SSC in Amsterdam? Where did those seeds go? So it's been a fantastic journey the last 2 years of being a part of the community, doing all those things on the side, really. Until recently, I wasn't in the business. I was the global data warehouse manager for Staples. Actually, was my last job in IT. I did for many, many years. I was in IT and did data warehousing for big corporations like Monster.com and Staples, and I worked for smoking on the side and doing my thing and hiding who I was during the day because of the stigmatism attached to it. That's another part of the legalization that, to me, is really, really important. Being able to just be yourself is a hard thing to do when you're a stoner, right? Especially when you do IT and technical work. People don't want to trust you. They don't believe that you're going to be efficient in your job. And I've proved otherwise.
Well, that's a common stigma, though, right? I mean, a lot of people go, stoners, people who smoke weed, they're on the couch, they don't get much done. But, I mean, we have examples of people in all sorts of industries that are leading, and they're stoners, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's more in the Northeast and in the East in general. I think the West Coast and the Bay Area, there's lots of people, they smoke all the time, they're used to it. Culture out there. It's not that big of a deal in Washington State, in that Seattle and that hub there. But still, it's not, especially on the East Coast, it's not welcomed, right? If you're a stoner, you're out. You're on the outside. Right. I think that's also an important part that I want to get back to when we start talking about NEVA is that isolation, right? The best way to help veterans, in my opinion, is to make them a part of a community. Getting them back into a place where they feel comfortable, where they have people they can communicate with. That's the thing that helps bring people back. I think that's the thing that helps with suicide prevention, PTSD, and a lot of these other problems that I think a lot of veterans experience. I don't personally know because I'm not a veteran, but I've seen it, and it's one of the things that concerns me, which is why I've been that's the main charitable organization I try to do work for within the industry is for the veterans because they're adults and they can enjoy the cannabis. But because they really do need some folks looking out for them, helping them out. This is not a community of people that has a lot of job prospects when they get out of the service. That has probably a lot of skills before they went into the service, possibly because they went in as kids. So there's lots of opportunity and lack of community and isolation and all those things that I think are important pieces that people kind of overlook when they possibly think about helping veterans out. Or even today on Memorial Day, thinking about veterans and, remembering those that we've lost. I think it's really, really important that we take steps to try to lose less of them. Right?
Definitely.
There's so many veteran suicides. It's terrible.
I mean, for me, we have a veteran here in studio. I think one of the biggest things is, like, when you guys are in the service, it's like such a big family and support, and like everybody's literally got your back. And when you get home, you're like, well, it changes, right? Like,
I want to echo what it's Hoda, right? I'm saying that right.
Yep.
I want to echo this is Sam. The camaraderie that you experience in the military is like none other. I've been in a number of different jobs in the civilian sector, and it's a brotherhood when you're in the military, in a sisterhood. It's a big family. You don't look at race, you don't look at gender, you don't look at the color of the skin, you're looking at the uniform, and a lot of the times you're putting one foot in front of the other in these miserable conditions just because you have somebody to your left and to your right that is doing the same thing, and you get out. For whatever reason, I have a 30% disability. I have a hurt lower back, and it was one of the things that made me not renew my contract. And you get out, and you lose that sense of camaraderie. You lose that sense of real tight knit community, and you yearn to re-experience that. And I think that isolation is one of the big problems that the veteran community is experiencing today.
And when you get out, right, the only thing you really have left of that connection is like the VA, right? And then like typically what I hear from the VA are not great things. You know what I mean? They're not very welcoming and not very, it's hard, right?
I try to stay away from the VA whenever possible. I don't feel community when I go to the VA. That's not something that I necessarily experience or seek. I did just graduate from college. There is a sense of community there, but it's definitely not the same. Even in the workplaces, it's a very kind of superficial relationship. And other than some of these activist events, because I'm familiar with NEVA, I'm a big fan of NEVA. And doing activism with Masscann, we really do develop a bond over time, especially, now where everything's fairly legalized. You're not really putting you're not doing these criminal acts when you're doing civil disobedience out in the public. But there was a time when it was really bad for you to be going out and talking pro-cannabis.
Well, that's the thing, like with Hoda, right? So Hoda, you took a 20-year break, right? You went from like a Florida to a New England market where, I mean, as we know right now, Florida is kind of in a state of kind of disarray still, generally speaking, I guess we could say. I mean, things are starting to happen down there. It seems like there's a lot of force and power down there right now, but it just doesn't seem like the state wants to comply with any of it. What was the biggest difference for you? What was the biggest difference from you besides like cookies, man? Like, I mean, now you're teaching with the Grow and Tell, right? You raising money for NEVA, so you're doing a bunch of great things. Like, for me, I guess would be is like, what's your biggest difference that you see in 20 years? And I guess the second question would be is, what's the number one thing people are coming to your classes looking for?
So I think the number one thing is, with legalization, you can show your grow, right? So that's where the Grow and Tell came from. It's like show and tell, like everybody had in kindergarten, right? You bring in your stuff and you talk about the airplane or whatever you brought in for show and tell, this glove or baseball I got at the game or whatever it might be. So I started the Grow and Tells basically off on that same type of a thing. So as I mentioned, Tommy Fox said, like you should get on Instagram. I think that's like the biggest difference is there's actually you have the ability to communicate about growing now. For many, many years, most of us who grew, you were hiding. You couldn't tell other people. You couldn't talk about it at the grocery store, right? You had to talk about tomatoes. Hey, I need something for tomatoes because if you mentioned cannabis, they'd call the cops on you.
Right. They're part of the problem.
That's the way it was in Florida. I had friends in Florida who were followed from Worms Way and some of those Worms Way busts, right? FDLE sat across the street, took pictures of license plates, followed people home, and granted, my buddies were running a whole house.
Right.
But they weren't doing anything that they should have been doing. But the point is that it was very scary. So now you can talk about it. You can go to a grow store. I encourage people, if you want to learn about growing, go to the closest grow store. Go in there and ask questions because you can now. You couldn't talk about it before. Instagram has been incredible, right? You mentioned on the news earlier about Facebook still shutting down accounts. They own Instagram, right? But Instagram's great because you can be anonymous on Instagram. So if you're in an illegal state, you can still be on there and still communicate and still learn. So there's just tremendous learning opportunities that were never there 20 years ago. The bulletin boards were 10 years ago, 15 years ago at most. 20 years ago, it was High Times or it was Ask Ed articles, or you talked to somebody who you knew through a friend who might have known something. So it was impossible to get information back in the day. Now there's a flood of information. I learned so much stuff watching YouTube videos by John Burfello and getting online and talking to other growers. And now that I know all these other breeders who've been doing all this work for a long time, I definitely have some incredible people that I can talk to and learn from. But I think that's the biggest thing that's changed is the amount of information, the access to information that's out there, if people are willing to take that first step. And so the grow and tells, I get people of all levels. And I get people who are first-time growers. I get people who are just thinking about growing. When you're not growing yet, right, the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out what's the space. Where am I going to grow? Am I going to get a tent? Am I going to use a closet? Am I going to convert a room? Once you know your space, then you can get lighting, right? Pick the type of lighting you want to get. LED is the way to go. Anybody who's buying HID bulbs these days is really just wasting their time, in my opinion. LED is the way to go. If you want to do some mixed spectrum, that's okay. But you need to pick your space first. Then you need to pick your lights. Then you need to figure out whether you're going to go soil or hydro or what you want to do there. And then you get yourself some genetics, because you want to pick genetics that are going to work in your environment. And that's, I think, I get new growers. That's what people who haven't grown yet or who are just starting out, that's what they want to know is, what type of light should I get? Or should I use soil? Should I go with deep water culture? To me, soil is the best place for people to start out, because it's the most forgiving. And if it's really good soil, you don't really have to do a lot.
Now,
I think that's, yeah.
During your classes, though, now the people who are coming, are these consistently, I guess, are they more patients looking to provide for themselves? Are they just more enthusiasts, or is it just a great mixture?
It's a mix. It's a mix. I get both people who are using cannabis for medical, for pain, for anxiety, for stress, for things like that, for especially chronic pain. Chronic pain is a common one. But I get a lot of people who are growing for recreational purposes, just to grow their own. It's the flower that you grow yourself is going to be better than anything you're going to get at any dispensary, because it's fresh. Just like if you grow tomatoes in your backyard, those tomatoes are better than what you're going to buy at the grocery store. That's why you go to a farm stand on the side of the road to buy your vegetables, to pick up some vegetables instead of just getting it at Stop and Shop, right? Because it's fresh. It's the same thing with your cannabis. If you grow your own cannabis, you know what went into it. You know whether hopefully you didn't use any pesticides or chemicals on it. Stay away from Miracle-Gro and all those other types of products. But you know what went in it, and it's fresh. And you didn't get handled by a bunch of people, and it didn't sit in a box for a month, and it didn't have to go to a lab and get tested and come back and get packaged and get passed around. And by the time you got it from that dispensary, it's been a month down the road, and it's not going to be as good as what you grew yourself, and you'll learn a tremendous new appreciation for the plant. But most of the grow and tell is not really an education. It's more of a community session, right? It's a community sesh. I only talk for about a half an hour of the 3-hour grow and tell, because I want everybody to get together and talk. Going to all those events, the thing I found was you don't get to have good conversations about growing. You have quick 5-minute interactions, introductions, exchange a nug, say hello, buy a pack of seeds. You don't really have time at an event, a big event like Masscann or CannaCon or even Harvest Cup, to talk about growing. And they're very far apart. They're spread out months and months apart. So I want to do something every month, second Thursday of every month. I wanted to get just people in the local community who love growing and love the plant, and honor the plant, together to talk about growing and to share each other's, what they're growing, and sniff each other's jars and share each other's flower and talk about what they did and how they cured it and what type of soil they used and all that stuff. That's what the magic is. It's bringing that community core together on a consistent basis to build community. Back to that whole community thing again. Community is huge. And being able to grow your own at home legally and then bringing that growing community together has been freaking magic here in Massachusetts. That's why I think Massachusetts is really just doing some amazing stuff. The flower that's getting grown here is awesome. It really just tremendous stuff just coming out of the woodwork. All these little growers in their homes doing magic. It's amazing. It's tremendous.
It is. And that was my last question is, how do you feel about where Mass is heading? I mean, we get a lot of questions about the larger corporations coming in, but overall, how do you feel they're doing?
So Granted, the large corporations are going to come. They're already here, right? Let's face it. Most of the dispensaries are bigger guys with money. There's a couple of exceptions, but most of these were big companies. They were companies that had big medical facilities already, and they were the ones who had the cash and the facilities and the ability to get through all the rigmarole to get their businesses up and running. However, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, actually, because it helps with the normalization of cannabis. I want a cannabis store. I don't care if it's like a Walmart of cannabis in every city and town, because when it's in every city and town, it's not going to be looked at like this oddity. And as bad as these big companies are and these big corporations are, and the fact is their cannabis is not very good for the most part, they're helping the rest of us with the normalization, and that can't be missed. I don't necessarily agree on the other side of it that that the government needs to increase enforcement to help push people to the legal market. So I was listening in on one of the discussions by the Cannabis Control Commission, and they were talking about the fact that they had only about 25% of the Massachusetts market had been flowing through the legal dispensaries. And they wanted to add some new statutes. I'm sure you know about this, right? They wanted to add a new statute or two or some additional enforcement to help crack down on the illegal market, to help push people into the legal market so they can get the tax revenue, right? They're upset because they're not getting enough tax revenue, right? They kept saying, you legalized a taxable. They kept talking about tax. They kept enforcing the tax, and that's fine. They want their money. If that helps get more places open, it helps with the legalization, give them some money. That's great. But what they didn't say is they're upset because they haven't captured more than 25%. But the reality is within 6 months, because they haven't had places open for that long, right? It's only 6 months, 5% of a market in 6 months. If they had opened more facilities, guess what? They'd have had more
right.
percentage.
And then they complain about the shortcome on the tax revenue generated, right?
Correct.
But you don't have any stores open yet. Guys, we do have to take a break really quick. Hoda, can you tell people where they can find you really quick?
Yep. So Instagram, at Jotaherb, Jotaherb. You can also catch me every second Thursday of every month at the Summit Lounge in Worcester at my Grow and Tells, and any local event, Masscann, Canacons, Harvest Cups in Massachusetts, Springfield. I'll be at the Springfield Masscann next month, so that's the next place I'll be. But I'm usually at the big events. I'll be at Harvest Cup. I'll be at Freedom Rally. You never know when Hota will pop up. I'm also working now for Honor the Plant. And so I will be doing a lot of traveling around, helping promote our fantastic products that help home cultivators grow.
All right, man. That sounds great. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, guys.
I will. Thank you for the time today. It was really great. Really great.
Thank you for your time. Again, we want to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day. We want to remember and honor all of our veterans today, alive, dead, in service, or back here in the States who are struggling, right? We're going to talk about this in a minute. So, guys, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with Samson Racioppi, and I want to give Jotaherb a big thank you. Don't go anywhere. This is In the Weeds with Joseph Smith and Brandon Barberio.
I'm Brandon Barberio, your cannabis expert for In the Weeds, Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR. This week's strain of the week is the 7-Way. The 7-Way is a rare 100% sativa-dominant strain. Although the parentage of this strain is a complete mystery, it is mixed of 7 of the most powerful sativa strains on the market. They are super highly debated, leaving no real answer as to which strain may be possible as the parents. Nevertheless, the 7-Way is perfect for any sativa lover, packing and uplifting and energetic effects that really is a kickstart when you need to wake up or you just need a quick boost. You don't really feel a smash to the head, it's just a cerebral effect and a boom to your mood. This will leave you feeling energized and uplifted. These effects are long-lasting and not very psychedelic. You will take 1, 2, or 3 many 2 totes, and you will find yourself super energized and ready for the effects of the super high percent at 30% THC. 7-Way is said to be perfect for treating such conditions as depression, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and due to its adverse effects, it should be treating anxiety. The 7-Way bud has medium-sized dark olive-shaped nugs with light orange hairs and crystal trichromes. It has a sweet piney flavor and it smells of musky fruit, and it is often broken apart to release all of these flavors. Once again, I'm Brandon Barberio, your cannabis expert for In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDI.
In the studio.
Heading fell.
Whoa, I'm not driving. I'm way too stoned. How are you feeling, Beer?
Oh, since we had that talk, I'm not driving tonight at all.
What about you, Dave?
You only had a couple of drinks.
And only a couple of puffs.
I don't drink and drive. No way I'm getting behind the wheel when I smoked weed, too.
How are we getting home, then?
Well, you can drive, Dave.
Come on, Dave.
Take one for the team, buddy.
Don't let weed and alcohol influence your decision to drive.
Yeah, I need a ride.
And that's it, guys. Do not let weed and alcohol influence your decision to drive. Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully everybody's enjoying themselves, being responsible. We're at the end of the weekend, so it's been interesting, man. Speaking about Memorial Day, guys, again, we want to salute all of our veterans, past and present. It's not an easy thing to do, and the life afterwards is not an easy thing. We have a great guest on right now, Samson Racioppi, who's part of Masscann. You're involved in a lot of things right now. You're a big advocate.
I'm very outspoken on all sorts of subjects. To a certain extent, I've even created controversy at times, and I don't mean to. For example, Memorial Day. I think the best way to honor veterans is to not create more people who need services from our country. We don't send them into harm's way. And I just, like we were talking before, I just graduated from college. Thank you, VA. I really appreciated that. The GI Bill took great care of me. I highly recommend any veterans out there who are sitting on their GI Bill to seriously consider taking advantage of it, because I've been out of the service for over 10 years now, and it's helped me so much as far as networking and developing better skills. I now have a bachelor's degree. I graduated with magna cum laude, which is the middle honors. Been smoking cannabis the whole time.
Awesome. Congratulations.
I go into these classes. I try to make a very good impression. I dress well. I make sure I read the materials ahead of time. I know what I'm talking about. I develop this repertoire with the class and the professors. And then at some point during the semester, I'll drop it. I'm involved with the Massachusetts Cannabis Coalition. We're doing some sort of big pod event this weekend. Does anybody want to come and volunteer and do share some experiences with me? And I think that we talk about stigmas. That's one of the ways that we can, change the stigma as far as cannabis is concerned in our everyday lives. We go and, we do what we do well. And at some point, we share the fact that cannabis is a part of our lives, and it's made us who we are today. And without it, I don't think I'd be. I don't go around saying, "Oh, I'm a good person," but I don't think I'd be who I am today in a good way without cannabis.
Absolutely.
Now, for you with cannabis, right? Has it been something you've been doing most of your life, or is it something that you start after service or college?
So I grew up in Newburyport. Now Newburyport is an affluent town. It's Newburyport, right? It wasn't Newburyport when I was growing up. It was kind of it was middle class. You know, I don't know how my family managed to stay there for as long as they did. We got kind of priced out over time, and I was always kind of different in school. You know, in elementary school, you can be a little weird and it's not a big deal. But when you start getting into middle school, kids will pick on you, and that's what happened to me. Was I got picked on quite a bit. I was like bullied and stuff, and this was before all the madness that we're dealing with today with school shootings and stuff. This was before Columbine, and I was heading towards a path of. I mean, I was drinking as a young man, right? 6th grade, you know, I was drinking 7th grade. And I was with a whole bunch of other young people who were doing the same thing. And I was among the last of them to try cannabis, right? That was bad. I can't do that, you know. I didn't want to smoke tobacco. I didn't want to try cannabis. And so, because I was happy with alcohol, I had a steady supply of it. I could always steal it or get somebody to buy it for me. As a young teenager, I mean, looking back on it, this is crazy. But to the people I was hanging with at the time, this was completely normal behavior, you know. And then one day I finally tried it, you know. And I don't go up to 13 and 14-year-olds and be like, oh, if you're having a tough life, you know, maybe you should try cannabis. But because I, you know, there is something to be said about how brains don't stop their development until age 25, and we just don't have the data about it right now.
Right.
But for me, I was heading down a path of addiction, and it's in my family, alcoholism, addiction, and I tried cannabis, and I didn't realize it at the time. You know, these life-changing experiences, it's amazing how you don't recognize that your life has changed in that moment of time. But that's kind of what happened was... over time, I turned away from alcohol, and I started turning more towards cannabis. And it was at about 15 years old that I went to my first freedom rally on the Boston Common, and we're talking. This was, let's see, this was in the 90s, right. So 1996.
A little different than it was last year, right?
It was completely different. Yeah, I remember I took the train from Haverhill, and the doors opened up, and there was a bunch of potheads hitting bongs and smoking joints on the train. And as a young man, this was incredible to me. You know, I thought this was really cool. Looking back on it, I'm like, oh, that was kind of ignorant, right? We're trying to change people's minds. You know, we don't want to be doing stupid stuff. But for somebody who was looking for purpose in his life, that was really interesting for me. Now, I went to my first freedom rally by myself, and it was a great time. Spent the day on the Common. It was a beautiful day. And at the end, when it came time to clean up, there were volunteers going around handing out trash bags saying, hey, please pick up your area. Pick up the trash around your area. And I was heartbroken because the Common was trashed. This is not a new thing for us, unfortunately. The community just, we can't seem to pick up the trash when we're leaving.
Bring it.
And
well, not compared to a football game or a celebration like that.
Anytime I think you have that many people in the same space doing any sort of celebration whatsoever, because it is a celebration. As much as it's civil disobedience and trying to change the political will in your state and your country, it is a celebration. There's music and there's food and there's all sorts of things that, you know, people don't necessarily know that there's a lot of eyes that are watching them. And I made a choice that day that I was going to pick up trash. I was going to grab some trash bags and I was going to help them pick up trash. And then when we were pretty satisfied that we had done enough trash, I went and checked in with one of the volunteers and they said, go help them break down the stage. I was like, okay, cool. I went and helped them break down stage. And I spent the rest of the night volunteering with these people who were all also volunteers. Nobody is getting paid as part of Masscann. To this day, nobody gets paid as part of being a director or a volunteer with Masscann. I helped them finish breaking down the stages, and I went home. But, you know, I met a bunch of people that day who put this common cause of the injustice of prohibition above everything else. And they were willing to go out into this public space and say, I will be arrested if you choose me, because that was during when police will go into the common and grab people one by one throughout the day and make arrests. I went back to my normal life. Like, I went back and I was getting picked on and all that. Like, again, I didn't realize that my life was changed at that moment in time. And then some years go by. I've been smoking cannabis the whole time. And I would I'm going to talk about all sorts of crazy stuff. I have experimented with other types of drugs. And, you know, I've always turned away from them. But cannabis has always just been this thing that's persisted throughout the years. Go ahead.
Well, speaking about what you just said, right? That's one of our biggest things. Is it an entrance drug? Is it a gateway drug? Is it an exit drug? Right. So that's the question, right? So, I think you nailed it right there. I mean, that was my experience too. Like, you know, I think we've all tried something in our lives, right? And you know, like as a general person, I recommend people try something once in their life. You know what I mean? That, you know, make your decisions. Yep. Just don't get hooked. I mean, there's some things I don't recommend people go try heroin. You know what I mean? Like that's something you don't quite recover from, right? But
yeah, usually that's pretty addictive on the first shot.
Right. But, I mean, right. That's just one of those. That's just one of those things that blows my mind. Speaking of the heroin epidemic, because I mean, we can just look around, and we all have been affected by losing a friend, a family member, to heroin. And it's almost like it's what's worse right now, heroin or cancer, right? Who's taking more lives? Are we? You know, these overdose deaths are number one in the country right now. I mean, it's our number one killer, right?
God. I think when people smoke it for the first time, they're like, what are they talking about? I didn't go out and kill people, right? Like, I've been being fed this line, this ultimatum, don't ever do drugs. Cannabis is terrible. It's bad for you. It'll turn you into an idiot. And then you smoke and go, wow, this is pretty cool.
And
then you go, well, what else are they lying about?
Right. There's a lot there. But with that, you know what I mean? Like, for me, my experience was, you know, I think a lot of it is that it's that aura of being a bad thing, right? Like, when we're growing up and, you know, our parents are drinking alcohol and they're smoking cigarettes and they're telling you, no, you have to wait until you're a certain age, and you're like, I'm old enough. I can try this, right? The DARE classes, which is what I went through, they presented these things as if they were almost all on the same level. So they're like, okay, tobacco is bad, but, you know, you can smoke it when you're 18. We recommend you don't do it. Alcohol is also bad, but society has decided that you can do it when you're 21, but we don't think you should do it. This marijuana cigarette, this joint here, is illegal. It's the devil's weed. It's all these terrible things, and then they go on to talk about cocaine and MDMA and heroin and psilocybin, and you know, now we're looking at these things as if they're all also alternative therapies to a certain extent. I'm very excited about the future of MDMA and psilocybin and things like that, but that's for a different radio show. But you know, as a child, as a teenager who gets this presentation and then goes out and tries cannabis for the first time, you know, that question comes up. What else were they lying about? Are all these other drugs that they have been presenting to me as terrible, terrible things, are they all on the same level? And I just want to make one other point real quick. We talk about cannabis as an entrance drug, but for some reason we don't look at the tobacco and the alcohol as something that we should count first. I remember I tried alcohol way before I tried cannabis. I tried my first cigarette way before I tried any of these other things. Yeah, before alcohol usually, right?
Why are they the ones that we're calling the entrance drug? Those led me into cannabis, if we want to really talk about it, but no, it's because cannabis was the first illegal thing that people typically try. That's the one we point our fingers at.
No, I agree. That's exactly. I mean, usually as a kid, it's the first thing is a cigarette. The next thing you're at the party, so it's the beer, right, with your friends. And the next thing you're at the party drinking beer, and it's, I found some weed in my parents' bedroom drawer. You know what I mean? And the next thing is for me though, like, jumping from cannabis to a opioid is like a huge step to me. Like,
I can give you some insight for that. We have been conditioned our whole lives that if you don't feel well, take a pill. If you need to supplement your body with something, take some vitamins. These are in pill form. So we've been conditioned that like this hand to mouth motion is good, right?
Yeah, you get a headache. There's a pill for that, right?
And you go to a party as a young person, and somebody offers you a pill. It's a harmless looking pill. And I know many people that this has happened to. That pill is Percocet. That pill is some sort of opiate derivative. And they don't even realize what they're necessarily taking at the time. And I've taken opiate pain medicines. I've never, I've never been addicted to opiates, and I'm very thankful for that. But I've had procedures where I've had prescriptions, and I could see why people are addicted to it. It's there. I could consume that all day long, and that's why I don't. But to a young person who doesn't realize what's happening to them, that could see how an addiction would happen very quickly. And then when they lose access to that pill, and they look for whatever it is they can find in the street, and that's heroin.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. I mean, I actually had friends that not even cannabis related, just got in a car accident. One of my bestest friends in my whole life got in a car accident one day. Pretty much shattered his face. So he was on morphine, right? So kid's never done a drug in his life, gets on morphine, gets out of the hospital. They give him a couple months supply. Next thing you know, it's exactly the same thing you said. It just spiraled out of control. Got all of his money, spends it all, and is now dead, unfortunately, because of it all. So are we helping patients? Are we helping veterans? Like what's your stance on where the government stands? I mean, I know the VA has its hands tied, and it's really is it a good or bad situation? I mean, will this help the VA? I mean, give more help to patients? Is this just going to stumble the VA and push these patients to, again, the illicit market?
Well, I tell you, when I go and see my VA doctor, I have a relationship with this doctor. And so when she asks, do you smoke, do you drink, I tell her honestly, I consume cannabis. But I prefer if you don't put that in your system. Don't type that into your computer, because I'm leery of the government. I don't think that we're heading towards a more positive future, unfortunately, right now. I think that we have some very glaring issues that we're facing, and the opiate crisis is just one of them. And cannabis should be very, very low on the scale of things we should be concerned with. We need to legalize it. We need to deregulate it. We need to move on to more important things, as far as I'm concerned.
So how do you feel about the government rescheduling it to a Schedule 2 for a pharmaceutical company?
If that's just the first step, then one of the issues that I think that I have with political parties is some of us are so principled that we're not willing to take any steps towards success. It's all or nothing, and so I'm willing to take the first step. If that's the first step, then we'll take it. But we're going to continue fighting and pushing and doing everything we need to do to get it completely off the schedule altogether.
So you obviously advocate, right? So you're in Masscann, NORML, you're everywhere. So now veterans, again, it's Veterans Day. This is a big topic for us. We don't touch on it hardly enough on this radio show or anywhere literally in the country. It's our focus is on CBD and medical patients, right? Which, not that you're not medical patients, but I think the VA gets separated from that. We've had this discussion with a lot of people lately. It seems like, because the VA is a federally taken care of program, right? They take care of you guys, the military, everything else. It seems like the military's always separated itself from, the regular general population of people which are using normal hospitals, right? Now, let me ask you this though: if you have a problem, are you going to the VA or do you go see a normal doctor? Like,
I see the VA. I do go to the VA. Sometimes I have to go to Bedford. Which is, I forget, I just drove 2.5 hours from here, so that doesn't mean anything to you. It's a bit of a trip for me.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they can't take care of me. I'll get scheduled things for weeks out. I wouldn't wish this type of care on anybody else. And I don't want to get political, but if we're going to be considering things like government-run healthcare, we should fix the government-run healthcare that we have right now, and that's with the VA. If we can make the VA a shining example of what the government could provide, then maybe we could extend that to the rest of the country. But until then, I wouldn't wish that.
Right, and then maybe have some more support with soldiers and people enlisting to serve again, right? Because now we all look at these issues and like I don't, if I were looking at it as a whole right now, I'd be like, I can go, I can fight, but they're not going to take care of me on the back end.
They do. I will say this. I have recently been getting chiropractic care, and that's covered by the VA. So that's a huge benefit. Unfortunately, I was recently assaulted in Providence, Rhode Island, and I got taken in an ambulance to the hospital, and the VA did not cover that. So, it's hit or miss to pay. If you're dying, if you are having a heart attack, they want you to call them in advance and get authorization to go to whatever hospital that you're going to go to.
Like, really?
I'm not kidding about this.
So not just cannabis. Like the VA has a lot to work on, right?
There's a lot to work on. As far as cannabis, because that's what we're here to talk about. I do at some point see the VA embracing it, but it's not going to be until the federal government changes their mind about it.
Well, it can't be really, right? I mean, so let me ask you this:
it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, there's been stats that in the states that have legalized it, the VA has reduced prescriptions by about 30%. I think I saw some stat like that. So there's got to be some financial angle there that could be leveraged to say, hey, look, you want to cut costs at the VA, stop spending so much money on drugs.
Well, just think of the prescription.
People to use cannabis.
Well, just think of the prescription drug prices as it stands alone. I mean, some of these prices are ridiculous. I mean, even the Epidiolex that is derived from a cannabis plant is $32,000 a year for a patient to afford. You know what I mean? That's a lot of money.
Letting them use cannabis does what? Puts the pharmaceutical company out of business.
Yeah, let's not pretend that the government wants to save money.
No, right? It's not about saving money. It's they got to find a way to make the money off of whatever they're doing, right? So I don't think saving money is the big issue.
Those are resources that can be shifted to other things.
Right.
Right. So they don't necessarily have to go to the pharmaceutical company.
No, but now we're talking about pharmaceutical companies now. So, so you're a veteran, right? You go to the VA. Now, a lot of the doctors that we know are prescription pushers, right? Pill pushers. It's just, hey, I got like the doc. I mean, and you gotta give doctors credit, man. They've seen how many patients a day. They literally are like, hey, you got 3 minutes on a stopwatch to talk to this patient and figure out what's wrong with them and give him a cure, sign his papers, and get him out of here because we got 90 more in the waiting room, right? So these guys come in and like, we've all been there. We've all been like, misdiagnosed, given something that didn't help. You know what I mean? It's always here, a quick script, a quick script, a quick script, a quick script. How is it the VA? Is it the same thing? Are they pushing? I mean, because the opioid addiction is what the big national debate is right now, right? I mean, even our government's behind it and trying to fight it and try to curb it. Like it's not like we're not trying, and it's not something that no one's looking at now. My question is, within all this, we go to the doctors. I look at the doctors in all this because they're the ones that are legitimately, peer to patient, basically, and they're the ones pushing it. I don't care if GW Pharmaceuticals is whatever they're doing. It's the doctors is the gateway, right? How is it at the VA? Are they quick to just write you a prescription for an opioid?
Not well. I don't go in seeking it. And I don't know if others do. I'm sure. I hate to say it, but I'm sure that others do to a certain extent. I resolved a long time ago to stay away from pharmaceuticals. Like I knew the power of cannabis well before I was.
And it works for you.
And it works for me. Ibuprofen. I need to take ibuprofen too. 800 milligrams I've been taking, a couple times a day, unfortunately. But between that, the ibuprofen and the cannabis, I don't have to take anything harder unless, I'm having a terrible tooth and, whatever's going on. Right. And I'll go get some sort of temporary pain relief. I have heard stories from other people, though, that they are heavily medicated and that there's a depression cocktail. And there's all sorts of different things that do get prescribed. Now, if I'm having issues, if I'm feeling depressed or something, I'm not going to the VA and talking about it. I'm going out into the woods. I'm enjoying some cannabis. I'm taking my dog. I love my herb garden too. I do a lot of gardening and things. I try to find other ways to immerse myself in life because I think that that's just a byproduct of life. But I'm willing to bet that if I went to the VA and I said, hey, I'm having a down day and it's been going on for a couple months now, right, they would be willing to write me a prescription and tell me to come back in a couple weeks and let them know if they need to adjust it. You know?
Now is that a part of the problem or part of the cure? You know what I mean? Like that's where I go with doctors. You know, because I literally every time we have this discussion about prescription opioids, dude, they're prescriptions. Someone's got to write that script, right? So that's a final layer. So it's an ethics at that point. Like, is that doctor, you know what I mean? Maybe that doctor's going outside and smoking his joint after, working all day long, being stressed out, you know what I mean? But for some reason, obviously he's got his hands tied with prescribing it. I mean, some doctors do, right? States where they're legal, they can get away with it. But now we look at conditions, right? So, you guys, the veteran community is struggling from a bunch of these conditions, and a lot of them don't qualify still. PTSD doesn't qualify in some states, which is mind-boggling to me, right? Because, I mean, is that something that you struggle with personally?
Not from the military, but it is something. I'm of the mindset that we shouldn't have to go to the government and ask for permission to do something that is my inherent human right. Right. So I'm just leery of that in general. And then to talk about, I mean, you mentioned the doctors. Let's say that I went to the doctor and I said, hey, I'm feeling depressed, and they give me this cocktail. Now they go into their database and they say that they've prescribed me some sort of psychoactive drug, or they've diagnosed me with some sort of disorder. At another visit, they asked me, do you have access to firearms? Do you are they stored properly? Yep. And that begins this other process of we don't want to go down that road, right. but this is something that happens.
Technically, the rights that you actually lose by becoming a patient or trying to seek help in that aspect, right? And
so I think that there's a lot of veterans out there who are also hesitant to even ask for help when they're having these types of issues. And that's why I think that groups like NEVA are very important for the veterans community. And unfortunately, I don't know if even vets are seeking them out at this point. It's a very difficult thing to think about. Like, if you don't know, we're very good at putting on this face. The thing about the military is presentation. As long as you look like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, nobody's going to question what you're up to. Right. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned in the military, and I've taken that with me to this very day. And so I can hide anything that's going on behind the surface. And that's not always a good thing necessarily. No. That's not a bad thing in the workplace or whatever. But if you're having a tough time, I think that, it's important for us to reach out to our loved ones and to say something, or to our groups, our support networks and things like that.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of just people in general. I mean, we're always, there's lack of support. You know what I mean? The older you get, the more distance we get away from people, and like especially for vets, it's like you said when you came back. It's like you said one thing that really hit me hard is being in your garden. So like every vet I talk to, every Veterans Alliance I've spoke with, the number one thing that makes these guys feel really good about life again is being in a garden. You know what I mean? It's just that quietness, it's being around being around the plants. There's an electricity to cannabis that we've spoke about. The plants sing. There's a neat aura to it. Anyways, guys, it's at 10 o'clock. It's the top of the hour. We got to go to our quick break. You guys are listening to WGDR Plainfield, WGH Hardwick. This is Guard College Community Radio, 91.1 FM and 91.7. This is In the Weeds with Joseph Smith and Brendan Barberio, and our awesome guest today, Samson Racioppi and Jotaherb. Samson, how can people reach out to you if they want to connect with you on a personal level?
I'm on Facebook. You just search for my name, Samson Racioppi. I'm also involved with the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition. We do that big freedom rally in the Boston Commons. Just like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram, masscann.org.
All right, guys. We are going to take a quick break. We're going to go to Jesslyn with her health and wellness tips of the day.
Hi, this is Jessie Lynn Dolan, cannabis nurse researcher, educator, and consultant, and organic cannabis and hemp farmer. I founded the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association and bring you a weekly dose of whole plant to whole person medicine and healing tips. Weed over war, hugs over drugs, pot over pills. As Boulder Weekly puts it, this weekend is about more than just getting lit and complaining about the weather. It's also about thanking the people who fought to keep America the big, beautiful, messy bitch that she is today. So as we celebrate today with a barbecue, bong, and beer, let us remember the many brave and selfless individuals who sacrificed their lives for this messy bitch of a country, as well as show support for our living heroes. Today, cannabis advocates and veterans from all parts of the U.S. are gathering in D.C. to not only honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice, but to advocate for veterans' access to medical cannabis. They will be joined by the roaring motors and claps of the rolling thunder with over 500,000 motorcyclists riding through D.C. to honor military members who are missing in action or prisoners of war. They will be joined by our own local NEVA, New England Veterans Association, as well as the Veterans Cannabis Project and several other national organizations in hopes to change the stigma that surrounds cannabis. Plants over pills is one of the rallying cries as they argue that cannabis is supporting veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain, and depression. According to the data from the Department of Veterans Affairs, roughly 20 U.S. veterans commit suicide every day. A study published by the American Journal of Public Health suggests that access to cannabis was associated with an 11% reduction in suicide rates of males aged 20 to 29 and a 10% reduction in males aged 30 to 39. More than 50% of older veterans and more than 60% of Middle East veterans are living with some form of chronic pain. And research shows us that the death rates for veterans from opioid pain medications is nearly double the national average. In states with access to cannabis, recent studies revealed that death rates from opioid overdoses have decreased 25%. An American Legion survey from 2017 revealed 92% of veterans support further research of cannabis, 83% support nationwide legalization, and 82% desire cannabis as a federally legal treatment option, with 22% of veterans currently using cannabis to treat a medical condition. The Department of Veterans Affairs prohibits a VA doctor from prescribing medical cannabis due to its FDA Schedule I status, but allows them to discuss cannabis use as part of a comprehensive care planning. The Veterans Medical Marijuana Safe Harbor Act, currently in Congress, if passed, would allow veterans to use, possess, or transport medical cannabis and to discuss the use of medical cannabis with a VA physician. Congress recently passed a bill making the Department of Veterans Affairs the first federal agency to conduct research into the potential benefits of medical cannabis. Omuerta Genetics, a Canadian cannabis breeder, is not only offering free seeds to any veteran with the purchase of seeds, but specifically breeds chemovars for veteran-specific needs. From the chemovar called Drums of War for the Afghani hashish, earthy-tasting cannabis lover, to the sativa-dominant weed over war, hugs over drugs, pot over pills. As Boulder Weekly puts it, this weekend is about more than just getting lit and complaining about the weather. It's also about thanking the people who fought to keep America the big, beautiful, messy bitch that she is today. So as we celebrate today with a barbecue, bong, and beer, let us remember the many brave and selfless individuals who sacrificed their lives for this messy bitch of a country, as well as show support for our living heroes. Today, cannabis advocates and veterans from all parts of the U.S. are gathering in D.C. to not only honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice, but to advocate for veterans' access to medical cannabis. They will be joined by the roaring motors and claps of the rolling thunder with over 500,000 motorcyclists riding through D.C. to honor military members who are missing in action or prisoners of war. They will be joined by our own local NEVA, New England Veterans Association, as well as the Veterans Cannabis Project and several other national organizations in hopes to change the stigma that surrounds cannabis. Plants over pills is one of the rallying cries as they argue that cannabis is supporting veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain, and depression. According to the data from the Department of Veterans Affairs, roughly 20 U.S. veterans commit suicide every day. A study published by the American Journal of Public Health suggests that access to cannabis was associated with an 11% reduction in suicide rates of males aged 20 to 29 and a 10% reduction in males aged 30 to 39. More than 50% of older veterans and more than 60% of Middle East veterans are living with some form of chronic pain. And research shows us that the death rates for veterans from opioid pain medications is nearly double the national average. In states with access to cannabis, recent studies revealed that death rates from opioid overdoses have decreased 25%. An American Legion survey from 2017 revealed 92% of veterans support further research of cannabis, 83% support nationwide legalization, and 82% desire cannabis as a federally legal treatment option, with 22% of veterans currently using cannabis to treat a medical condition. The Department of Veterans Affairs prohibits a VA doctor from prescribing medical cannabis due to its FDA Schedule I status, but allows them to discuss cannabis use as part of a comprehensive care planning. The Veterans Medical Marijuana Safe Harbor Act, currently in Congress, if passed, would allow veterans to use, possess, or transport medical cannabis and to discuss the use of medical cannabis with a VA physician. Congress recently passed a bill making the Department of Veterans Affairs the first federal agency to conduct research into the potential benefits of medical cannabis. Omuerta Genetics, a Canadian cannabis breeder, is not only offering free seeds to any veteran with the purchase of seeds, but specifically breeds chemovars for veteran-specific needs. From the chemovar called Drums of War for the Afghani hashish, earthy tasting cannabis lover, to the sativa dominant chemovar called Bad Hombres, Omuerta has impressed this cannabis loving nurse. A chemovar called Seroquel is one to highlight for me. Seroquel is a commonly prescribed antipsychotic for PTSD and veterans. This cannabis chemovar has helped many vets with the plant over pills motto, medicating from the farm rather than pharmacies. Omuerta states this about Seroquel. Say goodnight. Another strain built selfishly for myself for PTSD, and insomnia issues, but now gifted to the world. Veterans, this one's for you. I've had the opportunity myself to grow Seroquel a number of times and craft its glorious medicine for many patients and veterans. From anecdotal feedback and personal experience, I can absolutely tell you it is just as Omuerta describes. As the Rolling Thunder motorcycles make their noisy way through D.C., I sure hope those vibrations are enough to ring the American Legion Freedom Bell and get some attention. As Reagan quoted years ago, our government's first duty is to protect the people, not run their lives. So as you enjoy this long holiday weekend, your barbecue bong and beer kind of day, tip one back and take a puff as you salute our nation's heroes and think about what you can do to advocate and support veteran access to cannabis medicine. Make some thunder and ring some bells today and every day. Plants over pills, power to the people. Happy Memorial Day from Jesse Lynn Dolan and the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association. Tune in to In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio next week to hear your dose of whole plant to whole person medicine and healing tips.
All right, just want to give a big thanks out to Jesselyn Dolan, our resident RN, who does our little segment for us. Guys, we normally do have Timothy Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions on the air with us right after this. Timothy is enjoying his Memorial Day off, so we're going to let those guys enjoy their day. But we're back with Samson, and Hoda should still be on the air. Hoda, you still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
All right, so let's discuss this. You guys are both from Mass, right?
Yep.
Mass is right now probably one of the hottest spots in the country for cannabis. I mean, I think we'd all agree, right?
It's kicking.
It's kicking. I mean, I think Oklahoma's coming up really quick. But as far as like where we're at, what we're doing, everything like that, the biggest thing is it is Veterans Day today, right? So we cannot talk about it enough. Support for our veterans, things that they can do. I know Hoda's talked about how he's raising money for NEVA. So, I mean, I'd like you guys both to touch on it a little bit more, on how people can get involved and help the veterans community in Mass. 'Cause, I mean, there's a bunch of different things that they can look at, right? There's a bunch of things they can do. Where can they go?
Yep. So for me, it's seeds and money. Seeds and money talk, right? So I think not only getting cash to NEVA, but also seeds to veterans. I think it's really important to just give seeds to veterans. Most of the breeders I know, Masscann seeds will give a pack of seeds to any veteran who comes up to the booth. A lot of the different breeders will. You just go on up and tell them, and if nothing else, they'll give you a discount. But there's a few Instagram accounts, Seeds for Vets. Obviously, the New England Veterans Alliance, or at New England Veterans Alliance, which is the NEVA organization on Instagram. Or come to my Grow and Tells, or hit me up on Instagram, which is at Jotaherb, and get cash or seeds are great donations, and we get those piped into to some veterans who need them, who want to grow their own medicine, or who are looking for some. I'm not taking those funds and getting them into NEVA or to one of these other organizations so that they can help veterans out is fantastic.
Yeah, man, it's needed. I mean, it definitely is needed. Unfortunately, it's a government issue, though, right? Sam, how do you feel about that? I mean, do you think, we're all talking about legalization, right? And we're thinking that the government's, we keep saying next week. It seems like we've been saying it for a few months now. How do you feel about it? Like, personally, I mean, you're kind of embedded in it. You're an advocate. You see what's going on. You're working with NORML. How do you feel about it right now? What's your state of mind on this?
Well, I don't go around. I try not to bring up this topic because it's such a divisive thing. But I'm going to talk about it real quick. President Trump, right? Now, say what you will about him. A lot of people think he's a populist. And so as part of that populist mindset, there's something to be said that he may consider just making an executive order or being like, I encourage Congress to make this happen prior to the 2020 elections. I could see it happening just as almost a gimmick, keep these people in office. Yep. They may do something like that to keep themselves in office.
Do you think they're going to use this situation as a political ploy?
They're not gonna use it as a political ploy. I know Elizabeth Warren.
Most of the bills are being pushed by Democratic representatives. Right. So you could see either side of them. They're both, whether they're going to use it against each other. Like, we both do it. I'm more for it. No, I'm more for it. Great, that's fantastic.
I know the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner.
Yeah, exactly.
Former Republican. He's now, and I'm sure it's money, but he's now hooked up with promoting cannabis.
Absolutely.
We're getting a lot of deflectors from the political area that were heavily against it, wouldn't sign bills, wouldn't consider it. We have Howard Dean now, the same thing. These guys were solid, we're not going to legalize anti-cannabis. No way. Now they're like, tax dollars. I'm making more money in this business in this 1 year than I made in my whole political life. You know what I mean? Sadly, it is money. Unfortunately, the politics behind it. I mean, does this help push it nationally? I mean, I think so. This is my general concession.
The banking bill's big.
The banking bill's a big.
Yeah, the banking bill's a big thing. When Washington State legalized, right before the legalization went on, I saw the sheriff of Seattle testify before Congress, and that was one of the things he brought up. And this is years ago already, right? This is 6, 7, 8 years ago. How long has it been legal in Seattle? That was one of the things that he testified in front of Congress about was, you are creating a problem because of cash. You are making these cash businesses. You are not allowing banking. You are not allowing credit purchases. This is causing a problem, and it's a safety issue for the state and for the city. It's a problem everywhere. I mean, I know there are banks in certain places that are friendly, but they don't allow you to drop off at any location. You actually have to go to specific facilities at specific times because you're rolling up with a van of cash.
Right. And it's cash, too. That's what people don't understand. I mean, these are bags of cash. Even when it was tax season, the IRS, right? I mean, people were showing up with bags of cash. They had to make cash rooms just for the money they were bringing in from the cannabis industries, right?
Right.
And how about the $3.2 billion federal cannabis deal that went through? That's a catalyst. That's why the banking bill's going through in D.C. Because you can't make a purchase of $3.2 billion in federal cannabis and have nothing to back it up.
Right.
You have politicians that are putting money into cannabis, like they are.
Yep.
You know, it's a driver.
They know they also have to align it because of the Farm Bill, right?
Yes.
Because the CBD and the hemp businesses also can't bank.
Well, it's also kind of hard to tax something when you can't put it in a bank, you can't make any money off it. The banks aren't generating any revenue off of it, really, you know what I mean? Because it can't sit in an account. They're just taking it, and it's a hard deposit. You know
that's what they want. They want you to put the money in there, right? To me, it's
they want a banking bill because they don't have a big enough IRS staff to go around to the cannabis businesses and collect the money direct from their safe. I mean, that's what it's really about. They want their money, and they're going to push a bill to get it.
Mm-hmm. So allow credit card purchases so you can track it all and make sure you get every one of those tax dollars.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just think about how easy of what kind of a market would be if we could use a bank, right? You could use a credit card.
Yep.
How much more support that these dispensaries and businesses would be able to get if we could actually walk in here with a credit card, or that business could actually deposit something properly without, again, driving around with. I mean, we hear about it all the time. Businesses driving around with huge amounts of money. There's people that are buying and selling that have to deliver and drive around to places because there's no co-op or there's no any sort of collective warehouse where people are going to purchase things, right? It's we've heard lots of stories, man. There's a lot of great videos out there on Netflix too, describing, different situations, different mountain areas.
Well, I mean, out in the West, right? It is kind of a scary situation. I've talked to you about this before, Joe, where I've signed NDAs for cannabis companies, okay? And you're on the inner working of the financial structure of these businesses, and eventually they take you to their undisclosed location where there's like 4 safes just full of cash. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and you're going, this is not right. Like,
right. Absolutely.
This is not right at all.
That, right? How do you count that in that time? You know what I mean? So it's creating a huge issue for businesses, but then it's also, so what do we do, guys? I mean, we're all here now, right? So what do we do? Do we deregulate? Do we legalize? What's the approach that we're going to do that's going to make it the most accessible for people to take that the next step forward, which would be the VA, the banks, the health. The biggest thing for me is the medical systems and the healthcare.
It has to be rescheduled.
It's got to be completely decriminalized. It's got to be completely removed. I think one of the biggest things that's going to hold the federal government back, believe it or not, and I'm sure we're all going to have a good laugh about this, is they are now being held to a certain standard where it's like, well, you guys can't make money off of this because you got 3/4 of the country locked up for cannabis crimes. So if you think we're going to let you get away with that, that's, forget about it. And everyone's going, oh, you remembered that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of these states are enjoying over $1 billion of revenues per year, right? And all these financial institutions, they definitely want a piece of that. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking forward to New Hampshire legalizing and doing the recreational market because I live right on the border. And every single day I look outside my house. I'm literally on the border, and I see hundreds of cars going into New Hampshire that are going to enjoy tax-free shopping, right, on all these retail purchases. And once Massachusetts starts opening up these recreational shops, they're going to be coming over the border into Massachusetts to buy cannabis at a 20% tax rate. And when New Hampshire finally legalizes, I'm willing to bet they're going to tax it, but it's not going to be at 20%. And this is going to create competition among the states, and that competition is going to put downwards pressure on prices. Right. Let me tell you something else real quick, because I just graduated from college, and one of my focuses.
Congratulations! Absolutely.
Thank you. Was philosophy, politics, and economics was the degree. And every single time I had a chance to write an economics paper, guess what subject I picked? Cannabis, right?
Cannabis.
And I came across this interesting piece of information. Colombia, right? The country of Colombia, they have such fertile growing conditions for cannabis that they can produce it at 5 cents per gram, high quality cannabis. So, I mean, once we're talking about federal legalization, we're talking about importing it from other countries.
And you can ship it.
We're going to talk
import it and export it.
Incredible downwards pressure on prices.
Oh,
I
man.
mean, it's going to be hard for these craft people to stay in
anyway.
business, but it's going to be great for us as consumers.
Yeah, I mean, that's just natural.
Prices are involved with risk.
Right. Well,
the price that it was at was involved with risk, and if you remove the risk, then the price has to fall.
Yep. I mean, but then again, so like we've seen recently. I mean, we've had Ed Rosenthal on the show, right? Ed Rosenthal, his biggest thing is free weed, right? Whatever you can do, free weed. Hey, how's your day today, Ed? Free weed. You know what I mean? That's his statement. 'Cause medical patients need the cannabis, right? Why are we taxing the medical patients? Why are we taxing a commodity? I mean, to me, it's a food commodity, right? It's like corn. It's no different than a potato, right? I mean, they're getting CBD out of a potato now. So what happens now to this potato? We're going to put is the FDA going to look over potatoes and
lock them up?
Exactly. You're going to buy a black market potato, you're going to go to jail. You know what I mean? And that's where our industry is going. So, I mean, the advancements in technology, the things these guys are finding out every day has been amazing. You know what I mean? Where they're finding cannabinoids and all these other awesome things besides a cannabis plant, right? So what happens moving forward with these other findings, right? Knowing that this potato can produce THC and CBD at a better level, at a stronger percentage than cannabis can, which is amazing to me, right? Now, banking, right? We talked about banking.
Now, that's really interesting. Smoking cannabis out of a cannabis potato.
Oh man, imagine that. Talk about an entourage.
Like, that's a great idea. Anybody else ever smoke out of a potato? I've smoked out of a potato. I've smoked out of
apples, right?
Yep, sure, absolutely.
Why not, right? I've seen somebody smoke out of a chicken once. That was interesting. Shout out to our friend Rusko Boggs. Yeah, it was well, maybe it was a turkey. I think it was a Thanksgiving Day turkey. But anyways, you never know nowadays.
That's from a book. I've read that in a book.
Well, I think so. I mean, here's where we got to change that stigma, right? I mean, we have veterans now that are looking for help with an issue that, you know, opioids don't seem to be helping with. Alcohol definitely does not help, man. One of the best things I read about is how the rate of depression and suicide rates among legalized states are dropping dramatically. That to me is huge. I mean, it's not only for veterans, people that are just suffering with depression every day, that literally when you go to your doctor, like we just said, what's the first thing they're going to do to you? Here's a script. Go drool on yourself on your couch for the next 8 hours, and you can't work, you can't do anything else, you can't drive a car, you may get the runs, and you could die. You know what I mean? Like, the list goes on. Not a way I want to spend my afternoon. You know what I mean? Now, you know, Sam, you're discussing that, you know, you're a veteran, you went to college, right? You are an advocate, and you're a part of all these boards, and you somehow maintain a daily life, right? Through the use of cannabis, right? So it's not like you're using it to get high, to sit on your couch and drool on yourself.
I do like to get high. Well, I enjoy the THC. THC is one of the things that I seek when I'm.
Does that work for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm a living testament. Oh, for sure. I'm a full spectrum guy.
Yeah.
Can I relay
that's what they're missing on the CBD stuff.
Well, that's it. That's the one thing about this whole industry, and we talked about earlier, because we're talking about isolates, right? Like how it's really cool that we're isolating all these compounds and being able to separate them, and then with that separation, we can actually really pinpoint how to help certain issues, right? It's kind of like for me as a connoisseur and a plant guy going, you know, there's a strain for that, right? That's a Joe Veldon phrase. There's a strain for that, right? You have a headache, there's a strain for that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the same thing with your doctor writing a script. Oh, I get a headache, let me write you the script of this one thing that works, you know? Which, again, when we go to a dispensary, I think a lot of that information is greatly lacking. I mean, I don't know about you guys' experiences with the dispensaries, but I'm sure that could be a whole nother show. You know, the biggest problem that I see is, you know your grower, know your strains, and, you know, every dispensary you should walk into should have 30 strains on that shelf, and each one that says, hey, you have a headache today, or you're PMSing, oh, you have depression today, oh, you need to eat, you know, oh, you haven't eaten like you haven't slept in a few days. Here's these options, and in each one of these options, you should have a sativa, a hybrid, or an indica-based plant. I know that we're kind of moving away from those stigmas of cannabis, and I want to help push people to realize that not everything's an indica hybrid or sativa based, but general knowledge. We have our uppers are sativas, our hybrids are more focused, and our indicas are like, hey man, I want to go sit on the couch and just feel really good. You know what I mean? Go nowhere for a few hours, and that's also important because, like we were talking before, people with anxiety shouldn't be smoking or ingesting a high-grade sativa, you know what I mean?
Shouldn't be smoking the Southern way if you got anxiety, that's for sure. You know?
And that's what our strain of the week is about for you guys that don't understand our strain of the week is we're trying to educate you guys on how to properly medicate, dose, and consume a strain that will work for you. You know what I mean? Because nothing hurts my feelings more than when you talk to somebody about cannabis and they go, well, I tried that and I hated it because I got anxious or I was couch-locked or I didn't like that effect, where it would literally be a 5-second more of a conversation to figure out that this might not be the best product for you, and to help you find the best product.
Well,
but guys,
people need to write it down. People need to write it down and keep track so that they can remember and like keep a log. You know, like, hey, I smoked Blue Dream.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah. How does it feel? Go find your 5 favorite strains. Go find what works for you, but log it.
And from where you got it, too. It's not just Blue Dream, because you get Blue Dream from 15 places in Massachusetts right now, and I guarantee you every one of them's going to affect you a little bit differently.
And they're all different. I mean, the phenos that these plants can produce are create another challenge. But anyways, guys, we only got about 25 seconds left. I got to say thank you, guys. It's been an awesome show. Happy Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Go hug a vet, man. Go say hi to a vet.
Happy Memorial Day.
Go sit down and smoke with a vet.
I look forward to my hug.
Yeah.
Right? Go sit down with a vet.
There's a veteran check-in at the summit today at 2 p.m. for any veterans if they want to go. They're Central Mass, Worcester Summit Lounge, 2 p.m. check-in for Neva's running. So if you want to go to that, that's a great thing for vets on Memorial Day.
All right, guys. Well, this is In the Weeks.
To WGR
We'll see you next week.
WGDH Hardwick, Goddard College Community Radio, 91.